ask you, Shemini, that means, and that means how many days preceded the 8th? 7 days. And we ask ourselves, what happened during the 7 days? Because when I open up this parsha, it says, and I'm reading the beginning of the parsha, Vayi b'yom hashmini, kara Moshe li'aron ulvanav, and uliziknei Yisrael. He's calling how many Kohanim are there? Aaron and 4 children. 5 Kohanim in the country. And he's calling the elders of Israel, the scholars of Israel. And there we see, as we read in Psukim Bet, Gimel, and Daled, that there are, what he's issuing here are orders on here on the 8th day for special korbanot. As far as Aaron Uvanav is concerned, they are to bring a chatat, an egel, reminding us of what? The sin of the golden calf, the egel hazahav. And this today on the 8th day, we're going to explain again why the 8th. It will be kapara, atonement. For which sin? Egel hazahav. For whose part in it? Aaron and his children. Furthermore, they're going to bring in a scent offering, an ayil, an older lamb in his 2nd year. And that will be an olah, an ascent offering, because today, the 8th day, if we ask ourselves, what are we expecting to happen today? Some of you have pointed out beautifully. Let's see the 2 key phrases. What's the expectation today, this morning? Pasuk, in verse 4, after Moshe gives the instructions, Vishor v'ayil ishlamim, for the peace offering. Who is that for? That's for the Bnei Yisrael. Lizboch lefnei Hashem umincha b'lulah b'shemen. At the end of all the instructions, we see the last 5 words of verse 4. Do you say it together with me? Ki hayom Hashem nira alechem. The expectation is, the hope is, the tefillah is that God's going to appear. As Ibn Ezra says, how will he appear? He's not going to come to a screen, here I am. He's going to appear through fire. The Rabbi Ezra says fire, Eish, as we read in the continuation of the Psukim. A further matter is, when he orders the Aaron and the descendants in verse 5, Vayikhu et asher tziva Moshe, they act immediately. El pnei moed. Okay? And I'm going now to verse 6. Vayomer Moshe, zeh davar. This is what you have to do, follow. Asher tziva Hashem, what God commanded to asu. And now the last 4 words, this 2 is a key word. V'yera elechem, God will appear to you. Kvod Hashem, the glory of God. Certainly, it has to be manifested in an abstract way, in a spiritual way. But this is the expectation. As I'm pointing here, Ki hayom nira alechem in verse 4. V'yera alechem. Okay, as we see, I forgot to put this up. V'yera alechem, God will appear to you. What? The glory of God. This is what we're expecting. We have yet to explain, though, why the 8th day. All of us, I hope, saw and heard on Shabbat and before the ending of the former Parsha called Parshat Tzav. And there we have the learning of Moshe being the acting Kohen Gadol, wearing clothing, which who saw that? Lavan, Chalak, white, special clothing, not of Kohen Gadol. And he served as the acting Kohen Gadol for 7 days of special sacrificing. Who's watching? Who's observing? Aaron and his children. These days are called the 7 days of Miluim. I once or several times tried to explain the verb from which Miluim comes from, which will be with the verb in the infinitive, le, ma, le. Literally, le male means to fill up. Le male. Yes, Ravid? Le male. Miluim is to give you responsibility. Le male yad, to fill your hand up with responsibility. These 7 days, Moshe Rabbeinu is the acting Kohen Gadol, is fulfilling the responsibilities in order, they call it days of consecration. We're working the Mishkan, building it each and every morning, folding it up each and every night. Building it each and every morning, folding it up each and every night. 7 days. And now, The drama, per se, the suspense, has risen to a new height. It's day number 8. Was the Mishkan built correctly? Were the sacrifices brought by Moshe Rabbeinu according to divine commandment in Parshat Tzav, were they sacrificed properly? Are the instructions now on day number 8 to Aaron and his children and to Zikinei Yisrael, their separate korbanot? Is everything clear? Is everything brought the proper way? Moshe tells Aaron in verse 6, come here. Kirav el ha-mizbeach, verse 6. Get closer to the altar. Aaron was a bit in trepidation, a bit hesitant, a bit reluctant perhaps. Moshe says, what are you shy for? What are you embarrassed for? The Midrash says, for that you were chosen to be the Kohen Gadol. Go bring your chatat and your olah offering, the egel, the baby calf, and the aisle, the ram. V'chaper batcha, atone for you, uve'ara'am, and for the people. V'aseh korban am, and then do the korban of the nation. We said the nation will bring 4 different korbanot, led by the nation of leaders. Number 1, what chatat offering are they bringing? Se'erizim, the goat offering. It reminds us the Kohen Mashiach. If a Kohen Mashiach erred, as we learned in the Chumash Parshat Vayikra, and he violated a karet offering, he brings a chatat offering, not like any other person, but he brings this goat offering. And Bnei Yisrael will bring an egel, a baby cow, and a keves, to be a lightning. The shlamim, they're going to bring shor va'ayil, and a mincha will be an enriched offering. It'll be mixed even with shemen. It'll be mixed with oil. 7 days of Miluim. Today is Yom HaShmini. Everything is brought and put on the fire. Follow the reading, please, in verse 12. Vayishchat et ha'olah. And he slaughtered the olah offering. Vayamtziu b'nei Aaron elav et hadam. The children are helping out, bringing the blood. Vayizrakeu al mizbeach saviv. We have the sprinkling of the blood of this offering on the altar. And then the Torah says the following in verse 13. Veta'olah. Okay? Regarding the elevating offering, the ascent offering, himtziu elav, they presented to him, to Aaron apparently, lintacheha, the parts that were cut up, vetarosh, and then it says vayaktir ala mizbeach. We learned last week the word laktir should generally mean what? To burn. To burn on the mizbeach. There's one problem.
It means and it was burnt.
Vayaktir will mean and he burnt them. Vayaktir ala mizbeach. He burnt. What problem though arises? Where's the fuel?
It was produced by God. It was accepted.
Until our reading, the fire has yet to come. Rashbam, the grandson of Rashi, asked this question. What do you mean Vayakter? He burnt it on the Mizbech. There's no fire, very good, on the Mizbech. So what could it mean?
It's a miracle of the, one of the time miracle of the...
What could it mean here, the pshat of the pasuk? And he burnt it on the Mizbech.
It's like the Hashem accepted the offering.
But it didn't.
He
Left it there and?
it was consumed.
There's no fire yet.
Then the fire came from.
So then, did you notice that this gentleman used the word then? Rashbam says he left it on the altar, no fire. So what does it mean, Vayakter, and he burnt it? Meaning, when the fire will come,
It will consume.
it will be burnt. It will be consumed. Do you understand what I'm trying to explain? There's no yet Aish on the Mizbeach. There's no fire on the altar. So what could it mean? That when the fire will come, by the way, let's use the word if, I-F. We don't know if everything is shalem, complete. Everything is par excellence. We don't know yet. There's anticipation. There's drama. In Pasuk Yudalid, verse 14, Vayirchatz et hakerev vet hakra'im. There's the rinsing, the washing of the innards and the feet, also to be burnt on the Mizbeach. Okay? And we asked beforehand, we'll just share it again. We noticed something unusual about the Chatat offering of Aaron and his children. We said that the Chatat offering is a regular what? Chatat chitzonit. And what should happen to the basar, the flesh, the meat, and the or? What did we explain? What should happen to a regular? It must be used. It'll be eaten by the Zichrei Kohanim, the males of the Kohanim, and the orot, the skins, will be divided amongst the duty, the mishmeret that's working in the Beit HaMikdash, or the Mishkan in this case. Yet the Torah says in verse 11, Saraf ba'esh. Aaron had this burnt outside, and we asked why. Rashi noticed this, of course. It says, you know what? We don't find a chatat chitzonit burnt together with the flesh and the skin outside, except for this and the miluim offering. How? Why? Al pi hadibor. God prophesied this to Moshe Rabbeinu. That's where we stand before we go forward, Mr. Wiederman.
So, this may be irrelevant, but I've noticed sometimes it says HaMizbeach, sometimes it says HaMizbecha. So sometimes it says masculine, sometimes it says the feminine. Is there a significance to the times when it refers to the altar in masculine and times when it refers to it in feminine?
Beautiful question. I didn't notice that. Vayikter HaMizbeach in verse 13. And then in verse 14, Vayikter al ha'ula HaMizbecha. HaMizbecha.
And we can even, like in Parshat 10, it says, he tir HaMizbecha.
Yes. That's what I just meant. I just read that. Yeah, I just repeated those two on your benefit. Yes. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm looking to see what could it mean. I'll tell you why. I have an answer. I have but it doesn't answer really. Al HaMizbeach is the Mizbeach, meaning which Mizbeach? The outer one. And then when it says that he's burning the Olah HaMizbecha, so maybe it's referring to the same Mizbech, but it's nicknamed Mizbech HaOlah. Why is the outer Mizbech nicknamed Mizbech HaOlah?
Because it's outside, so
it's outside, and what do we burn on it? Predominantly, all korbanot, but the olah especially. The olah offering you said is the olah taboker, the olah of the morning, the tamid offering that we mentioned. Maybe it's emphasizing that. But I would like to. I think who would talk about this would be Rabbi Sorotskin, was Naim L'Torah, which I don't have a copy of. My in-laws, I must get that. I would look it up there amongst the Achrom. You're asking a question of the later scholars, not the Rishonim. They would deal with such a thing. I will try to look into it. Thank you very much for raising that question, Shakok. Maybe have a piece of cheesecake in honor of asking. Oh, you had enough. In honor of those questions. Okay, any other questions, gentlemen? Okay, let's now go forward. Pasuk Tedva, verse 15, gentlemen. Vayakrevet korbanam. Aaron goes ahead. After doing the korbanot of him and his kids, he now brings the korban of the nation. And by the way, who is present? Did you notice? Who is here representing the nation? Did you notice in Pasuk 5? I skipped over it unprofessionally. Who is representing? Who's coming close? Huh?
On the 8th day, it should not be...
in Pasuk 5, who is representing Bnei Yisrael? Beautiful. Vayikrevu kol ha'eda. Look at me. We've seen the term Eda before. It could mean the congregation. It could mean the court of Israel. It could be the elders of Israel, because that's who's commanded in the beginning, you're saying. That's a good point. So we have representatives. Yes, that's what God ordered. Moshe, he apparently said to Moshe, call Aaron and his children, and calls the Knei Yisrael. So now we're learning about the orders. Moshe calls Aaron and the kids here on day number 8, and he calls the elders of Israel, so the representatives. When we do part 1 before the Shechita, do you remember what part 1 of the Korban is before the slaughtering?
We put the hands
on top of
the rush.
the head. What was that called? With the letter Samech, do you remember? Smicha. V'samach yado. Leaning of the hands on the head, doing a vidoy, a confession, yes? So we need representatives of Israel to do the smicha for the chatat offering, the olah, the shlamim, and the mincha offering, correct? In the color blue here, Bnei Yisrael are bringing all four offerings, chatat, sin, olah, elevating offering, the shlamim, the peace offering, and the mincha, the meal offering. So the representatives of Bnei Yisrael have to be there to do the smicha. Although here, we don't see the actual smicha, do we? No. Gentlemen, let's go on. We're now reading Pasuk Tet Zayin 16. Vayakrev et ha'olah, vayaseh kamishpat. Everything is done according to the laws of the chatat. Everything. That's what the Torah is admitting. That's what the Torah is testifying. If he's doing the nation's chatat offerings, he's doing like he did the Egel offering. Remember? The chatat of Aaron's children are done first, and now Aaron is doing the chatat of Bnei Yisrael. So the Torah says in the end of 16, look at the last two words, Vaya'aseh ka mishpat. The ka, the prefix ka means kimo, very good, just like the mishpat, law is. He did it just like the first one he did. Pasuk Yud Zayin. We're now up to the last one. Vayakrev et mincha. Now they bring the mincha. Look at me. Remind me, from what is the mincha brought from? Solet. Fine flour. Remember? Fine flour. Let's keep on reading. Vayimale chapo mimena. He fills up his what? His kaf hayad. He fills up the palm of his hand. Okay? But here, we're talking about something we already learned in last week's Parsha. Remember that amount? We talked about the scooping up and closing his fingers. It's called kmitza. Do you remember? We learned it last week. Kmitza. And we learned that. The Gemara talks about Menachem Menachot. Okay? This is complementing the olah offering, the shlamim offering, and now we have a mincha offering. Okay? Here, the kmitza was taken, but we'll see that the leftovers are eaten by the Kohanim. So this is a special mincha v'tzibor. Okay, only a kometz will go on the altar fire. Okay, but the leftovers, we'll see, can be eaten. Let's go on. Pasuk Yitchet, verse 18. Now next, vayishchat et hashor v'et ha'ayil. Who's bringing a shore and an ayil? Not who's doing it. For whom is the shore, the ox, and the ayil? For Bnei Yisrael. Vayishchat, he slaughters the shore v'etal zevach hashlamim. It's a meal of a peace offering, asher lam, for the people. Vayamtziu bnei Aaron, and the sons of Aaron present the blood. Vayizrakeu ala mizbeach saviv. It's done. What's done with the fats of the animal? Pasuk Yutet. V'etachalavim min ashor. Okay, the fat parts of this bull. Umin ha'ayil, of the ram. Ha'alya, the rump. Ha'mechaseva klayot, the covering in the kidneys. V'yoteret ha'kavein, and what's called the diaphragm of the liver. All of this are what? V'yasimu tachalavim ala chazot. They put the fat parts upon the breast. Okay, and v'yakter ha'chalavim mizbecha, and he burns the fat parts on the altar. And now what we're going to do is learn about a tenufa. Who was the one that asked me about the wave offering last week? I was trying to contact you. I think he was right. I think it was your brother, Dafka, who asked me about the tenufa offer. I didn't see it. It was written in last week's parsha. Is correct. Here too, when you have a shlamim offering, tenufa is done. Remember how tenufa is done? The certain parts of the breast and the shokayimim, the right, what is it called? The shank, the right shank. Remember how the tenufa is done? Molech, umei. I don't hear anyone. Molech. Come on, use your hands. Molech, umei. Excuse-moi. Molech, umei vi, ma'aleh, umorid. Very good. right? Molech umevi ma'ale. Speak. Ma'ale umorid. That's done right here.
Exercise and Zora at the same time.
Okay.
Deal.
Gentlemen, I'm in suspense. What's going to happen after everything is finished? For this and more in tomorrow's shiur. Chazak ve'ematz. Do you enjoy